For more than 47 years, our nonprofit, Resources for Seniors, has supported older adults and caregivers in Wake County. We can help in many different ways, including adult daycare programs, ramps and repairs, in-home supports, and consultation and referrals. Indeed, we're who to call when you're not sure who to call. Resources for Seniors stands ready to support you in your caregiving journey.
I'm Mark Costley, the founding attorney of Clarity Legal Group, the Triangle Area estate planning and elder law firm. You know those people who become overwhelmed dealing with the multiple challenges of being a caregiver? Clarity Legal Group helps people establish legal tools that avoid confusion, give them peace of mind, give them asset protection, and in some cases help them qualify for Medicaid. We help people get it right in the face of some of life's most important challenges. We don't just provide wills, trusts, and powers of attorney. We provide solutions and ongoing support. We provide clarity and peace of mind. It would be a privilege to help you.
Are you like 80% of seniors who would like to age in your current home? Call Wisdom Senior Care. Are you currently taking care of a loved one and finding yourself frustrated, tired, and even lonely? Call Wisdom Senior Care. Always available, dependable, and flexible. Come partner with Wisdom Senior Care, keeping wisdom at home.
Hi, thank you all for joining us today to talk about planning for driving retirement. My name is Marie Dagger. I am the occupational therapist at the Orange County Department on Aging, and you'll be meeting my colleagues Kim Lamon-Loperfido and Alison Smith a little while later in our time together today. So we are going to be talking about several different topics today, including driving skills and challenges, having the conversation with the people you're caring for in your care circles, and driving alternatives and planning ahead for what driving retirement will look like for you. So I will start out the conversation today talking about those driving skills and challenges. So starting out, why driving? Learning to drive and getting your driver's license is an iconic rite of passage in our society. It is a jump from independence and transitions into a symbol for freedom, a symbol for self-sufficiency. For some people, driving is tied to their livelihood. It is they have a job, they have a career that keeps them behind the wheel. For other people, it is a form of relaxation, a form of leisure to be able to get out and just drive around in their community. In our society, driving is connected to so many of the activities that we engage in that make us who we are. The ability to drive helps to define our identities. At least pre-COVID, the eating and shopping routines that we've all had, our social connections, our faith rituals, our work, our school, our volunteer activities. So many of these are connected to our ability to transition from point A to point B. But driving isn't necessarily as easy as it sounds. For many of us, it is a second nature activity, something that we've been doing since we were teenagers. But driving is actually an incredibly complex set of skills requiring strong and collaborative functioning between our physical, our sensory, and our cognitive systems. So let's think together for a few minutes about how each of these areas work together to help us drive safely. So physically, we need to think about our strength, our joint mobility in order to do all the actions required for driving. That might be turning that steering wheel, adjusting your brakes or adjusting your lights and your wipers, being able to hit those brakes and switch between the pedals. Or I know in my case, in order to back up, I put my hand over that seat next to me, put my hand on the wheel ahead, and turn all the way over my shoulder in order to make that backup motion. And that requires so much strength and mobility in the neck, in the torso, in your shoulders, your hands and your wrists and your fingers, even your foot and your ankle joints to make those motions. And sometimes we think about this as muscle memory, but driving, the physical act of driving, is more than just turning that steering wheel. There are also our sensory skills, our visual needs, our acuity, being able to see clearly at that distance, as well as those near dashboard gauges. We need to have a good field of vision, the left to right distance, being able to see what's ahead of us, but also pay attention to what's beside and what's behind us at the same time. Our depth perception, being able to judge how close or how far away something is from us. Our auditory skills as well. So many of our cars these days have lots of alerts and bells and whistles, so being able to hear that seatbelt alert when it goes off for you, or hear a lane change warning. Or you hop into your car and you turn it on and something just sounds off. It doesn't sound right in the vehicle itself. And paying attention to sounds in our environment, the backup signal of a truck nearby, the honking of a nearby car, emergency sirens going down the road near you. And there are also our mental and our cognitive skills that we need to be paying attention to. Our processing time, for example, being able to take sensory information in and figure out what it means to you in your situation. Your reaction time, being able to respond in a timely way to the things that are happening around you. Attention, being able to focus on what it is that's right in front of you, as well as all the other things on the road around you, and any conversations that are happening in the car, any things that are worrying you while you're driving that are taking up mental space. Our sequencing, so lining up all of the events required for driving in the correct order so they happen successfully. So I know for most of us, we need to be able to have our key, put it in that ignition, turn it, make sure your foot's on that brake, and then put the car into gear. Because if you try and put that car into gear before you turn that ignition key, it's not going to be quite as successful for you. We need to think about our timing, being able to slow down in time for that stoplight that's coming up ahead. Or in my own vehicle, I need to get the timing right between my brake and my clutch and my gas pedal in order to move successfully forward. And then there's our spatial awareness as well, knowing where that stoplight is in relation to you, or knowing where that intersection is in relation to your destination. All of these skills come together in our tactical abilities, our strategic abilities of driving, being able to make decisions and actions to successfully change lanes or navigate your route in 5 p.m. Friday afternoon traffic. All of these skills come together to make you a good driver. And for all of us, there are skills that come a little bit more easily and some skills that come a little bit more challenging for us. And there are factors in our lives that affect our ability to drive safely. There are external factors like bad road conditions or a heavy rainstorm that can make driving more challenging. I'm sure we've all had that moment where you're in a very sudden downpour of rain and your first reaction, whether you realize it is not, is often to reach over and turn down that radio, reduce that sensory stimulation so you have more energy to focus on that task of driving right in front of you. But there are also internal factors that we need to be thinking about driving, changes in our body that affect how we are able to manage when we're on the road. And there are any number of conditions that can alter our ability to drive safely. So there are some natural changes that occur in the body as we get older. We actually need a little bit more light at age 60 than we did at age 20 in order to see the same way. And that can actually make us a little bit more susceptible to glare as well. Our field of vision slowly comes in a little bit over the years. It can become harder to distinguish between colors that are very similar to each other. Think about a gray car on a foggy morning and being able to pick that out of that fog. Our brain speed for processing and reacting slows just a little bit over the years as well. But there are also changes in our bodies that aren't typical per se, but are very common as we get older. Conditions that can affect our eyesight, our clarity, and our field of vision. Losing some of those upper ranges in our hearing spectrum. Having more stiffness or pain in our joints that can make it harder to grasp and grip and turn. Medications for other conditions we might be experiencing can give us a little bit more sleepiness or dizziness sometimes, which can then in turn affect our ability to drive safely. And then there are larger diagnoses as well, ones that can cause physical or cognitive changes. Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and sometimes MS can all be progressive conditions. And so their effects on the body are going to be changing over time. And so a person's abilities for driving are also going to be changing over time. Some of these diagnoses may mean a person won't be able to drive in the future, but everyone's experience and timeline will be different. I think it's important to say here that a diagnosis does not necessarily remove a person's ability or privilege to drive. Driving abilities are along a spectrum. There is so much gray area between being a driver and not being a driver. And now there are modifications we can make to make driving more possible for folks who are having challenges. We can make changes to the vehicle itself. Say a person is having difficulty with turning to check those blind spots. We can make changes to their mirrors or their cameras. Or say they have some lower body weakness or difficulty in their range of motion. We might be able to change to hand controls rather than foot controls for those pedals. Or we can think about behavior changes. Say maybe a person is only going to drive during daylight hours, or maybe they're only going to drive to familiar locations. But we do need to be aware that there may become a time when it's not safe for that person to drive anymore, and that modifications can't make up those differences. And that's when we gradually start talking about finding alternatives to driving. And so, like we said, abilities and skills change over time. As a caregiver, you need to keep your eyes open and stay aware of how the person you're caring for is managing while in that vehicle. The Hartford provides a great publication at the crossroads of situations that you can keep an eye out for, red flag moments, if you will. I have divided these red flag moments up into 3 different categories for us, these categories based on the resource plan for the road ahead. We do have 2 resource pages for you at the end of our slideshow, and both Plan for the Road Ahead and At the Crossroads are included in that resource listing, so do be sure to check that out, if you will. So our first category here is our operational challenges. So our operational skills are our physical ability to move and operate that vehicle, thinking about how your body moves and manipulates while you're sitting in that driver's seat. And so that might be things like riding the brake or difficulty turning to see while you're backing up, trouble navigating some of those turns. And you'll see a star on the screen there right next to confusing the gas and the brake pedals. You'll see a couple of stars on the next couple of slides, and those indicate red flags that are a little bit bigger than some of those other red flags. Needing a little bit more time to, starting that conversation a little bit sooner than maybe you would for some of those other red flag moments. We also have our tactical skills to take into consideration, maneuvering while you're on the road, following the rules of driving, and managing where you are in space. That might be things to look out for might include scrapes or dents on the car or the mailbox or the garage. Maybe other drivers are honking the horn a little bit more often while you're in the passenger seat with the driver you're concerned about. Moving into the wrong lane sometimes. There's also a point up here for driving at inappropriate speeds, and I did want to make a comment there, just because if the person you're concerned about has always driven a little faster than the speed limit, then driving at a slightly fast, inappropriate speed might not be as big of a red flag for somebody who is always a very speed limit abiding driver. So always take into consideration the person's habitual skills around driving while considering these red flag moments as well. We also have our strategic abilities, and these are our skills in making decisions, whether good decisions or bad decisions, while driving, especially making decisions in unexpected types of moments. And so challenges here might look like getting into a car accident, maybe getting more distracted than usual while driving, or getting confused at an exit or an off-ramp. You might notice it in terms of decreased confidence or more anxiety or more agitation while the person's in the vehicle. And so I wanted to wrap up my portion here with a quote from that At the Crossroads reference that I mentioned. And just remembering that within all of us, we do need to remember that we're human and we all do make mistakes sometimes. But it's that combination and severity of red flag moments that should lead to further communication around that situation. Occasionally being distracted or needing a co-pilot while you're driving to a new destination doesn't necessarily mean that driving is dangerous, but the combination of many of those red flag moments or the larger red flag moments like confusing the gas and the brake pedal, that should mean that a conversation should happen sooner rather than later. And those conversations are going to be around this idea of driving retirement. And thinking about driving retirement isn't necessarily a black and white situation. It's a continuum of skills, a continuing conversation throughout the process. And with that, I want to hand it over to my colleague, Kim Lamon-Loperfido, to continue our conversation about continuing this conversation.
Hi, so thank you, Marie. I'm Kim Lamon-Loperfido, Aging Transitions Administrator at Orange County's Department on Aging, and I have a background in social work and have worked with folks to have these conversations, so I'm looking forward to sharing with you today about having the conversation. Marie has set us up nicely for the things to look out for with our older drivers and how to maybe prepare for that conversation. So many drivers are already understanding the needs that they can limit their driving. Everyone who's a driver is probably eager to avoid a stressful driving situation. And a 2009 study suggested that having a conversation with family and maybe physicians is really what had an impact on an older driver's driving cessation decision. The actual number of accidents for older drivers decreases as age increases, and this is because of self-imposed limitations like driving fewer miles or maybe not driving during those challenging weather conditions. However, older drivers, especially those after age 70, are more likely per mile driven to be in a collision. And like Marie shared, driving is really is tied to that sense of identity. And so having this conversation is really going to have some emotional impact as well, as we want to encourage a conversation that's respectful and thinks about future planning that Alison will be talking about to really make the appropriate decisions but be sensitive to the needs of the older driver. And ideally, this is a progressive, positive, and ongoing conversation that attends to the needs of that driver. And we're really looking to avoid a sudden, unnecessary change. It can be helpful to have the conversation because the sooner you start, then you're able to try more options that Alison will be sharing soon. So, before you have the conversation, it's really important to know that you have a lot of homework. And so, not to put any pressure on you, but you're really going to want to think about the situation from the driver's perspective, what driving means to them. Like Marie shared, it could be a hobby, it could have been for work, it's getting from point A to B. So understanding what that meant to the older driver, as well as learning those warning signs and checking out some of the resource guides that we include at the end of the presentation. But Marie's warning signs and really hitting home that observing your older driver over time, maybe observing any self-imposed limitations that they've already considered, thinking about the alternatives available in your community that Alison will be sharing, and then thinking who else might need to be involved in this conversation, involving your physician, friends, or maybe family and neighbors who are local. And thinking about who's going to initiate this conversation. Just because you're watching the presentation doesn't mean that you're necessarily the right person. You want to think about the history of the relationship that the person has with the older driver to really think about setting up for success. Maybe someone who's a little more outspoken is a really good enforcer. However, they might bring up some energy that doesn't help the conversation go its best. So it can also be helpful thinking about who should be involved if there's an offline conversation before involving the older driver, where you get on the same page with the friends, the family, and those who might be part of this conversation. So family caregivers also thinking about wanting to unpack some of the energy and emotions that you're feeling about this situation. There can be a lot of guilt and maybe even some frustration. And so you want to think about that you're basing your decisions in facts, observations, and thinking about how you can really meet those transportation needs. As long as you're attending to those and really balancing safety with the needs of the transportation that's being eliminated, then you're going to really be setting your driver up for alternatives. Your support and understanding is necessary before, during, and after the driving changes are made. And so knowing going into this that it's going to be an ongoing discussion, there might be some emotional reactions, but being prepared to listen, listening closely to the fears, apprehensions, and challenges that are really present for the older driver. This is a huge lifestyle change, and so it's not going to be without emotion. And so that's why we want to encourage that early conversation so that it's not an immediate change, but maybe it's that gradual change where you're trying out the alternatives that Alison will be taking you through in a moment. A lot of older drivers who were surveyed, about a quarter of them shared that their biggest emotional reaction to this kind of conversation was actually sadness. And that was because they had a fear and sadness around being a burden or maybe not being able to continue to engage in their community, which is why thinking through alternatives is really essential. So it's important to consider that you don't want to avoid a conversation because it's unpleasant, to set someone up for an unpleasant reality of an accident or something more dangerous. So we'll chat a little bit about having the conversation in a variety of scenarios. And initially, when there's no safety issues present. And so this can be a time when it's pretty low stakes for family members and the older drivers. And so thinking back to what Marie shared with us is what are some of those red flags. And so you're not really noticing this. You're just bringing it up as a conversation. And even folks who pass a driving exam today say that they might not feel comfortable behind the wheel given the changes in the driving environment. Thinking about this area, maybe there's more drivers on the road than there were when the person was younger. But this can create a normal, regular part of your interaction with your older driver. And so then when an issue does become present, it doesn't feel so out of the blue. When you're noticing some limitations, so maybe some of those red flags, and the next slide we'll be chatting about those starred red flags that Marie chatted about, but this is maybe some minor limitations. Maybe you're noticing your older driver has some self-imposed limitations. They're not driving in the evening, or they're avoiding during bad weather. As a Midwesterner, avoiding snowstorms, but even here, avoiding those weather situations. And actually, surveys of drivers suggest that those would be really good times to bring up a conversation with them. And so older drivers have shared time and again that they are open and receptive to this conversation. It's just who's going to initiate it. And so that might be the biggest challenge for the conversation. And really, this is going to be on you as the caregiver. So this can be a time to discuss some interim measures and maybe agree on we're going to keep touching base on this as time passes. But it can also be a great time to praise those self-regulations that folks are doing so that you can encourage the relationship as positive and progressive and that you all are working together. So multiple warning signs or those starred red flags that Marie mentioned we really want to make sure that this is a time that you have to have the conversation. It's kind of at that point where if you've been avoiding it, this is the time to make that direct appeal. It can also be really helpful to bring it back, not about the driver, but about the health situation. A lot of those changes that could be creating the challenges with driving can be attributed back to health conditions that Marie had mentioned. This could be a really good time to consider a comprehensive driving evaluation. That allows both you and the older driver to get the facts before making a change. And maybe you've come to this presentation where the person you're caring for is no longer driving. And so that also is an element of driving cessation, like Marie shared. It's a continuum. And so you want to think about that giving up driving is not giving up engagement in the community. There are many forms of alternate transportation, but this lack of driving might lead to lack of socialization, isolation, potentially even depression. So you want to be especially attentive to the person you're caring for, whether they're now no longer driving, or this is where you find yourself in the continuum in a couple months or as you progress with this conversation. It's really important to listen and watch for signs of depression and acknowledge that this is a huge lifestyle change. So there might be some grief. Maybe it's time to just listen, spend some extra time together, and think about how you can continue to facilitate those social engagement opportunities in the community. So it's probably going to come up as a social worker who's helped caregivers work through these conversations. I've seen the variety of the ways that the conversation goes. Everything from folks who are on board and definitely feel like, yes, thank you for bringing it up. I really feel nervous about continuing to drive, to maybe not seeing eye to eye. And so in this situation, the most important thing that you want to keep in mind is to maintain your relationship with the older driver. It's really more about that trust and ongoing conversation than an immediate cessation from driving, unless safety is the absolute most paramount concern. And a lot of times folks might have different opinions on where the driver is, which is helpful to go back to getting the facts and having that comprehensive driving evaluation so that you're both on the same page about what are the true abilities, cognitive, physical, as the person's in the vehicle. Sometimes folks also want to maybe involve the DMV in the process. And while the state might be legally able to remove someone's licensing privilege, we've definitely, I'm sure, known people who've driven without a license. And so that doesn't really necessarily alter the conversation, but it might alter the relationship that you have with the older driver and make this process more challenging. Again, like I said at the beginning, all conversations, you want to be there and listen and really just fully understand what their challenges or opposition is to driving cessation. Is it that they want to pick out their own groceries at Trader Joe's? Or is it that they really want to get together with friends to play bridge on Thursdays? So are there alternates to meet those needs? Did they have to be the driver? So listening and understanding what it means to them. This could also be the first time that an adult child or a spouse has had to really push no on something. And so considering that you might not be the best person, really coming back to, am I the person, or is there someone better to have this conversation? Maybe that might be more neutral. And always being prepared to take a break from the conversation. This is not a one and done. I think that's one of the things throughout the whole presentation. It's ongoing. It's really a conversation. And so to maintain that relationship, we really have the last resorts of taking away the keys, disabling the vehicle, and selling the car. I can think back to support groups where folks have taken these actions and then they have stories about how the person's called in a repair person to fix the vehicle. So there's definitely alternatives for the person to be able to get the car back online, but that also impacts the relationship and the trust that the person has with their caregiver. So in the special circumstance of where dementia or cognitive changes are present, some folks, like Marie shared with some of our diagnoses like dementia or Parkinson's or MS, but specifically dementia, can drive even at that early stage of diagnosis. And so over time, those abilities to drive will become compromised. And especially in the cases of dementia, it's important to consider that those folks might not be able to assess their own abilities. And so your role as a caregiver, watching and being part of that evaluation, is really important. Many times it can feel like you as the caregiver, you've seen the person lose so much, and this is one more thing that they're losing. And so you might want to unpack some of those feelings yourself before involving the other person, the person with dementia, in the conversation. So having that neutral, the driving evaluation is something so many caregivers often consider. They also, in support groups, mention having the doctor write a prescription and thinking about something like a driving contract. So in our presentations resource pages, we have that from the Alzheimer's Association. And so this can be helpful in the early stages where folks with dementia and their care partners can really say, when is a good time to let this be a transition? What does that look like? And that can really be because it's hard maybe for the person to remember that they had those conversations, so having something in writing to refer back to. And if the conversation doesn't go well, don't blame yourself. The disease can really be a potential impairment into their insight in that judgment of their driving abilities, but it could also change mood and personality. And so you want to see maybe that reactions are more pronounced. So being gentle with yourself as you approach this as well. So advice from other caregivers, like I said, support groups, working with families for the last 5 years. There's no easy answer. There's no right way. Each family is unique in their approach to caregiving, in their approach to this driving cessation. And while that might feel challenging, while you're all unique, you're also not alone. There's more than 500 people registered at this point of filming for this conference. And so knowing that you as a caregiver, you're not alone in this journey. You can also reach out to support from friends, family, other professionals like OTs, social workers, transportation specialists, and local departments on aging or agencies on aging. You can utilize the caregiver conversations in the resource slides, and keep in mind that open, early, and continual conversations can both help the family and the person retiring from driving to really be a team in this process. So it's never too soon to start the conversation, and hopefully you've given yourself time. And Alison, who's going to be up next, is going to give you all the great options that you can try throughout this process.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Marie. It's like Marie mentioned, logistical and strategic independence is so important for seniors, and that is why Kim talked about starting that conversation about planning to retire from driving. On an average, Americans outlive their ability to drive by 6 to 10 years. So that means if you don't have a reliable source to get to the doctor's office, go buy your groceries, or even just get house supplies, it's not a realistic expectation that a senior can stay living in their home as they age. So that's why we're going to talk about driving alternatives and planning ahead. The first thing we want to do is look at the transportation portfolio. Everybody has one, and what that means is what transportation options are available for you. There's public transit, private transportation programs, ride-share services, volunteer driver programs, and then family and friends. So we'll start with public transit options. Every county has public transit. It's a low to no fee service that you get because you pay taxes. In Orange County, we've got Chapel Hill Transit, which covers Carrboro and Chapel Hill. We have Orange County Public Transit, which covers the entire county except Chapel Hill and Carrboro. And then we have Go Triangle, which connects Wake County, Durham County, and Orange County. What these services offer are fixed routes, and what that is if you look at a system map and you look at where you want to go, you find that route, and you go and you get that schedule to that route. So let's say I want to take the G route. I'm going to look and I'm going to say, okay, I need to get it at this time, at this location, going in this direction. And if you want to go somewhere that takes multiple routes, all of these public transit partners have community outreach coordinators, and they will help you plan your route. And all of their websites have trip planning programs. And if it's like Orange County, there's a transportation specialist like me that can help you. Now, shuttle services are also available, and they're far easier to navigate. Chapel Hill Transit has the Senior Shuttle, and Orange County Public Transit has the Hillsborough Circulator. And what this is, it's a fixed route in a loop, a timed loop. And these two particular shuttles go to a senior center, they go to a public library, they go to a grocery store, and they stop at many community housing places, typically catered toward locals or seniors. So it's an excellent service. And then the demand response services is another option through public transit, and this is for folks that can't utilize fixed routes. On demand is different. It's door to door. You have to be certified and qualify for this program, but you can call. They'll send a paratransit bus to come pick you up. It'll take you to your appointment, and then when you're finished, they'll go to the appointment and bring you home. They use a paratransit bus, which means it kneels. It has a platform that will lower all the way to the ground so that if you're using a walker or if you're in a wheelchair or if you just can't negotiate steps, you can walk onto that platform and it will bring you up to the level of the bus and you can enter. This is typically for seniors and elders, and this is what I spend a lot of my time doing, telling seniors about these services and helping them get applications to there. Next are private transportation programs. There are many programs like this, and they're different everywhere. They're growing all the time because transportation is a huge need. So I'll just go over a few, and then you'll find yours when you start your research. So Seniors Helping Seniors. This is a national franchise where we'll have seniors needing rides, getting help from mature adults that have a passion for helping. It is, there is a fee for the service, but it's wonderful. The Seniors on the Go, this is a local program. It services Wake County, Orange County, and Durham County. It's a companion service. It's a little pricey. It's about the same as a taxi. It can be $30 one way, but it's catered to seniors. So you know your senior is going to get the care they need. Veyo. This is a company that partnered with healthcare systems. So they offer non-emergency medical transportation, and they do it through insurance benefits. So it's important if you have a caseworker or a social worker that they look to see if this is a benefit that you have in your plan. Envoy America. This is in 7 states now. It's interesting because it's helping seniors outside the home. Most of the senior care we hear is for inside the home, but this is a companion care where they will go door through door, get somebody, spend the time at the grocery store shopping with them, stay in the waiting room at a doctor's appointment. It's very helpful for seniors, and it's all focused on outside the house. Then there's Independent Transportation Network. This is a national consortium of transit partners. It's very innovative. I think it's exciting. It uses a mobility portfolio. I think there's over 13 states involved now, and everybody is given a personal transportation account so that you can use it wherever you are. So that's exciting, and we have one here in North Carolina in Charlotte, but I believe this will grow. And then finally, senior care services like Right at Home. This is when you hire a service to do home aid, health, help clean your house, do some cooking, measure out your medicines. Sometimes a line item on their list will be transportation to certain places. And of course, all of these do have a service, but it's safe, it's reliable, and it's an alternative to driving. Now, rideshare services. I'm sure you've heard of Uber and Lyft and taxi cabs. Uber Lyft is a program you need an app for. People love it because it's a little less expensive, sometimes a lot less expensive than a taxi, and it's prepaid. You know what you're going to pay, but you have to have an app and a smartphone and be comfortable using that. Taxis and cabs, you can hail or organize a ride with one of them. You will not know what you pay because you don't know if there's going to be a detour, you don't know if there's going to be bad traffic, and you do have to have money exchange hands with that driver at the end of the ride. And I would say in particular, this is the most expensive. There's Go Grandparent. This is a really neat middleman service where folks will help people who don't have the app use Uber and Lyft. So they'll call them on the phone or email them the information that the app would have needed or would have provided to them, and they just charge a per mile concierge fee. So you will be paying what you would pay for the Uber or Lyft and then a little over that. And then there's things like Via and Silver Ride. Via is a paratransit van that you can hire. You can arrange to have for 2 hours. If you have enough folks that want to get together and utilize that van, you can cost share. You can all chip in and use that. We don't have that in our area right now, but it's definitely growing. And then Silver Ride. This is similar to Go Grandparent, except it's for all organizing and managing of transportation. It is a concierge service. You do pay for it, but they will figure out Uber, Lyft. All of your transportation portfolio, they will work with you and they will get you those rides. So that's fun. And then, of course, volunteer driving programs. These are typically free or very low fee. You've got local nonprofits. We have the Center for Volunteer Caregiving in Cary, North Carolina, that has a great volunteer driver program. Faith-based communities, churches very often have a van, and they will offer rides to their members. Senior community centers like Passmore and Seymour, we offer our volunteer driver program. And then neighborhood networks. There's a lot of neighborhood networks that are developing aging in place groups where there's a bunch of volunteers that get together to help each other and age in place, and a lot of times there'll be people who will volunteer to offer rides. But I'll tell you about our volunteer driver program. We're in Orange County to fill in the gaps. So if somebody has registered for Easy Rider, I just got their application through, and it's gonna take 3 weeks before they're approved, but they need a ride now. We'll offer that ride. Or all of the public transit sites won't go outside of our county line to an appointment that's really only 10 miles away. We'll offer that ride. And very often, we'll work with our transit partners to ride share. So when you get a ride with an on-demand vehicle, you have to wait an hour beforehand, and you pretty much have to wait an hour afterhand. So that can make it a very an all-day excursion. So if we'll drive you one way and that wait is taken out, it can just make it a less stressful and a more convenient situation. And then family and friends. This is an excellent resource, and Kim talked a lot about this when she talked about having that conversation. Who is available in your circle who knows you very well, who sees you often, who visits the same people you visit, who goes to the same church you go to, you enjoy the same grocery stores? You need to make a list of these friends and families, what their availability and what they're willing to do. They want to help you. You're important to them, and they're your friends and family. So that is the end of our transportation portfolio. Now let's take this information and see how we create a transportation plan. Where do you begin, and how do you do the logistics of making this happen? This is where we begin. We go to eldercare.gov, and we use their zip code locator, and then it will tell us every area agency on aging available to us in our zip code. And then we go to ridesinsight.org, and we enter our zip code, and it will give us every transit option available to us in our area. For example, I did this with my zip code, 27516. Eldercare.gov gave me 8 areas and aging agencies, including our Orange County Department on Aging and our senior centers. And I did put my zip code in the Ride in Sight and got 16 transit options, many of which we just discussed. It was Chapel Hill Transit, Orange County Public Transit. It was Seniors on the Go and other private transportation programs. It was my volunteer program through the senior centers at Orange County Department on Aging. So you get all this information, you have your list of resources. What do we do now? There are 2 really good websites that can help you. My mobility plan through the CDC creates an overall aging in place plan for you. And of course, a big important part of that is transportation. I highly recommend and refer Plan for the Road Ahead. We've talked about that website already. Well, they have an excellent tool that will create a personal, tailored transportation plan for you. What I did here is I kind of remade their questionnaire in a at-a-glance snapshot. You're going to list everywhere you can think about you need a ride to. Grocery store, doctor's appointment, haircut, bank, senior center, fitness, all of these things. And then you're going to put that in to start the questioning. Then they're going to ask you, how many times do you do this? 1 to 2 days? Once a quarter? Then they want to know how far it is. Then you need to ask yourself, do I have family and friends? Where's that contact list? And where's my transportation portfolio? Do I have that there? Once you've done that for every line item, you hit submit. It's gonna create this transportation plan that's everywhere you want to go with every resource you have. So when you have this transportation plan and the contact list you created through having the conversations that Kim talked about, and the contact list you created by going to eldercare.gov and ridesinsight.org, you have a completely comprehensive transportation plan. Planning for stopping driving is the same amount of planning required that you would do for retiring from work. You wouldn't work for 30 years and then your first day of retirement think, oh, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? Would you? No, it's important that seniors cannot start planning soon enough on their transportation plan. It's so much easier for them to look at their options and view them before it's their only option. I like to tell people, try it for fun before you have to try it for real. At the Orange County Department on Aging, we do have a master aging plan that we work with a ton of community partners to try and create the best community we could have. One of the 8 domains is transportation. So we have a transportation work group that consists of social services, health services, and transit partners. We get together quarterly to talk about how we're doing on the goals that we've set. We track our progressions. We see where we could make changes. We build that community and that networking because we want everybody to have access to care, and we want to have the best community for transit-dependent seniors and everybody that needs transportation to get to their medical appointments, to not stay isolated, to be able to age in place and stay in their home. Because like I mentioned at the beginning, the average American outlives their ability to drive by 6 to 10 years. So if you feel passionate about helping create ways where folks can age in place and everybody has access to the health care they need, and we're limiting isolation and depression, please go to eldercare.gov and look for area agencies in aging. Come to the Orange County Department on Aging and volunteer with us. We have senior resource teams that work on these problems. Any volunteer can be involved in our MAP groups. So if you are feeling passionate, please do something. Reach out. There are ways for you to help. So, Kim and Marie and myself all thank you very much for choosing our topic. We have all of our contact information listed at the end of our presentation if you have questions for any of us. And I will reiterate, we have a very robust resource list that you can use to do your own research.